Oh, thanks for
Yeah,
asking.
really appreciate it.
Yeah,
So,
me too.
guys, we are live today, and I was thinking about how to introduce Pascal. and let me just mute all the video, by the way. Um, so perfect. So I was thinking about how to introduce Pascal properly, and then I was like, okay, do you perfect know you perhaps know that situation? You have like a favorite show on Netflix or on YouTube, and there are like some actors in the show, and you can really identify with them because they have like a similar story or they have similar struggles than you. And then you think about how cool would it be if I could sit down with one of them or even like record a podcast, right? That's how I think. And for me, right now, this is the situation because my favorite show on YouTube is called The Improvement Season.
Oh
It's
yeah.
a, it's a show that is hosted on the YouTube channel Revive Stronger, where Pascal and his business partner and friend Steve share their struggles and challenges going through their individual bodybuilding and fitness journeys. Like as an example, I guess the first couple of episodes were about their way to the stage. Like they had to get like stage lean, and then like something happened to Pascal. He had to like switch things up, and that was also in my cut back then. Like I was cutting down body fat as well, and it was just amazing to see other guys like going through the same struggles and challenges. So for me, it was like, dude, I need to have Pascal on the show and talk a little bit about his story, how he became a coach at Revive Stronger, and also like talk about how to set up a proper fat loss phase, because I know a lot of you guys ask me almost on a daily basis, and I thought like Pascal would be the right guy for that. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here, and especially like it's funny to hear when you're talking about the improvement season, because I mean we've been doing that since the beginning of 2017 now, and it's now over 2 years of recording episodes on a week-to-week basis. And for ourselves, it's even cool to look back and see how we improved, how we changed over time, and especially for me, so much has changed ever since then in my life and my just mentality looking at life and stuff. So it's kind of a logbook for myself as well. And now that you just said it, like the first episodes, looking back at those, it seems so far away already, but it's only close to 2.5 years now. So it's no 2 years now, I think it is, which
Yeah,
is
yeah,
crazy to think about that.
yeah, it's funny. Like I always think about, like, for example, you will be a father soon, but I guess
Yeah.
you will probably also be a grandfather in a couple of decades, and your grandchildren can like watch like your videos probably. And
Yeah,
right now
that
you just have
is
like
crazy.
you just have a picture of your grandfather perhaps from 1940 or something,
Yeah.
and then you can like they can like watch your videos, which is also pretty trippy.
Funny enough, this is something so my girlfriend Katie, we both actually talk about that quite often because we always have our mobile device with us. We aren't really the type of people who are posting a lot about what is going on in our lives. Neither do we record that much, but at the same time, we do still take many pictures and many videos, which when I look back at my childhood, I don't have many pictures from my childhood. And it's just so cool to have something like that available for your children to let them see how they behaved, how they acted, all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, absolutely. And for something like the improvement season, it just gives them a better idea who their parents are or were in the past as well. Because to be honest, I have no idea who my mom actually was back in the days. A couple of photos, but you don't really get an idea of who they were. And having something like the improvement season or all the things we are creating at the moment is also kind of a testament for later generations, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, it's so easy to leave a legacy right now with YouTube.
Yeah. Hopefully it doesn't change though with Article 13 now coming up.
Yeah, so many. Changes so fast, to be honest.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask you something, like talking about YouTube really quick. Do you have that as well? Like when you're a person that is like growing on a yearly basis, you look back on your older videos, and I feel kind of embarrassed of what I was talking about 1 year ago. I was like, damn.
Right. Absolutely. So every once in a while, I see an episode flaring up from the Improvement Season podcast. I take a look at that, and I'm just so embarrassed many ways. But I think it's just a normal process of getting older. What you deem as correct now, or what you like and enjoy now, is probably not the things that you've enjoyed like back in the days. It's the same when it's come. So I'm tattooed all over my body, and when people are asking me the typical question about, don't you ever regret that? No, because every tattoo symbolizes a different stage of my life. Sure, if I have the time, or if I had the opportunity to get all of my skin now tattooed with some other motives, I would probably pick some other motives, because my life just completely changed, and the way I look at life, the things I do enjoy in life, just completely changed. But it's just a process of growing up and getting mature, right? But yeah, I mean, yes, definitely. I'm looking back at some videos and it's just like, holy shit, hey, mate. What
Yeah.
did you just do there? And also, especially because my mother's tongue isn't English. I'm actually born and raised in Germany, and at the first, well, in the first episodes, everything was still a little bit, I don't know. I wasn't as so I was kind of confident, but not as familiar in recording those type of formats. So it was everything was a little bit rusty, and also the language wasn't as good as it is now. There's still lots of room for improvements, but I mean, it's getting better and better over time. But especially hearing how I talked back in the days, it's just already like, oh God, just cringeworthy. But
Yeah.
that's the procedure of getting better and progressing over time, I think. So
Yeah. You need to be comfortable with embarrassing yourself.
yeah, absolutely. But I've
Because
always been like that. I mean, I had no problem actually putting myself out there, and also making a little bit of a fool out of myself. But I always knew that it is for a certain purpose and intention, and that always helped then in that situation.
I mean, that's the reason why I liked you and Steve so much when I saw one of your first videos, because you were like able to be a little bit goofy, you know, especially you were
Yeah.
like a little bit goofy in the podcast, you know, like, yeah, good
Yeah,
stuff.
I know. So too many people hesitate in actually showing that side of them, especially of the feeling in the science-based community, because everyone wants to be that intellectual individual and try to sound super intelligent and all that kind of stuff. And I think that you can share value in a different kind of way. You don't have to always sound like a university professor or so and I mean, let's be real here. The majority of the people, they don't even understand what these highly intellectual people are talking about. When I'm listening to, I don't know, quantum physics or so, it's just like blowing my mind, because I have no idea what they are talking about. And I tried it because I find it so interesting, but it's just way over my head. And the same applies to something like that, always trying to sound intellectual. The art comes in to sending a message across in the simplistic, in a most simplistic way as possible, right? And everyone can sound intellectual, but wrapping it in a gift paper to make it really understandable for each and every single one out there is so much more important. And by that, if you can also show a different side of yours, why not? People can then relate more to you, because you're not that perfect individual. And I never think that I am, and thus I have my flaws. Why not show them to the world then, right?
Yeah. And you will automatically attract people that are kind of like you, I guess, especially as a coach.
Yeah, and everyone is like that, actually,
Yeah.
right? Each and every person out there has a goofy side to them, has an insecure side to them, has doubts in life. So trying to be that absolutely perfect individual is just an illusion, and you're basically lying to yourself. You're selling something that is not the truth.
Yeah.
And maybe this is also the reason why I'm not the biggest fan on something like Instagram, because it is exactly that. And this is something that I'm not the biggest fan of, like selling millions of lies over there, or illusions. And I was working in as a post artist back in the days. So before I got into personal training, that is all about retouching pictures for big campaigns or so. Mostly I did it for bigger car companies such as Mercedes, Audi, BMW, those campaigns. So it didn't really retouch people that much anymore. Did start with that though, and what you always wanted to create is that perfect world and an illusion basically. And for the person who looks at the picture, that they don't question that perfect reality, that they just take it as granted. But if we really think about it, that is not how the world is, and nothing is as perfect as you see it in those commercials. But you wanted to deliver it like that. You want to create the illusion, right? And because of that, I'm well aware of how to set up illusions as well, and what the campaigns, the ads out there are trying to achieve, right? And don't let yourself get fooled. Something like Instagram is no different, but more on a quote unquote personal level, because now it's not an agency that is behind that, who's trying to sell you something, but more so, yeah, that one individual who's trying to make you relate to them, and by that sell something to you. Of course, that's not always the case, but with those, I mean, with those people, the influencers who are making a lot of money out of that, sure, it became a business for them, and it's absolutely right. But the transparency is most of the time not there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you especially see it in the fitness industry. Like when I look at my best pictures I've ever taken, I put them on Instagram. I was like real 10% body fat, and people think I look like that all year round.
Yeah.
And they also think I feel like right now. Right now, I'm probably around 15% body fat. They think like, he must feel exactly the same, you know?
Yeah.
But they don't realize how shitty you actually feel if it's not your setting range.
I mean, I have the feeling that it's also changing a little bit, but more so because there is a trend there and a demand. And when it comes to a market, it always is based around demand, right? When there's demand from the people, someone will fill that demand with a product. And there was a time where people were just attracted to that, or to those perfect realities. And now slowly they're just sick and tired of that. And it's more about now that people demand, I don't know, transparency and honesty and all that kind of stuff. And it's funny because there's the irony that now other people are filling that demand with a different type of product, but at the same time, it is kind of still the same thing. It is selling you something that you want, or that you believe you want. So I don't know. I sound so negative when I always talk about the social media, and I've seen amazing things over there as well. The one thing that I can think of is just achievements from people all over the world, or people such as in our realms. There are a couple of people who are doing powerlifting or bodybuilding with a cerebral palsy. So
Oof.
it's a full body. Well, it is basically a neural disorder, if I'm not mistaken. And it is just amazing to see those accomplishments, right? And for this, social media is great, and of course to get to know other people. I mean, we know each other via social media as well, so it can be so positive. But yeah, at the same time, it, of course, such as everything, has a shadow side to it as well.
Totally. Yeah, so you already touched on your story, like working for Mercedes and Audi. And what I want to talk about as well is then you became basically a coach for Revive Stronger. And what was like kind of the process for you to become a world-class coach?
Yeah, I don't know if I call myself a world-class coach. I mean, I'm humble when it comes to that. Probably have still a lot of years before I'm even remotely close to that level. If I can get there at all, I don't know. We will try, but I wouldn't call myself a world-class coach now. But the process was, so back in the days, as I already alluded to earlier, or I was working as a post artist. So I was sitting basically in front of my computer the entire day, wasn't really interacting with people much. And I'm kind of a people's person. However, at the same time, I'm an introvert as well, even though that it doesn't seem like it on from the outside. But I do like my space. I do like being on my own as well. I do enjoy that more than being around other people, which is quite funny because I've been playing in a band for 10 years. I was on tour lots of times. I was working as a music manager and tour manager at the same time, so constantly on the road, constantly getting to know other people on a day-to-day basis. I always called them 5 minutes friends, because you had a short conversation and you probably the likelihood that you are going to see that person another time in your life was really, really low, right? So it's funny that it's just taken a 180 degrees turn for me, that I more so became an introvert. But yeah, so during that time when I was working as a post artist, I was just like, I was seeking for somewhat of an interaction with people. It was just a missing part of that thing. And at the same time, I was starting or getting into being a post artist just by interest. It's just the way I am. When I'm interested in something, I just consume everything and I try to be the very best there. And that is just, it sounds crazy, but it takes up my entire day then. During that time, so when I got into post art, being a post artist, before that, I was working as a music manager and all that kind of stuff. And all of my free time, I was watching YouTube videos. And when I had the time, I was doing retouching on the side. And I even do remember the time when I was working in an office for music management. I was sitting there with my notebook. And when I had the free time, I was switching over to Photoshop and retouching stuff while I was sitting in the office, which is crazy. And I hope that my former bosses don't listen, but I know that they don't. But yeah, if they knew that, right? Holy shit. But that is just the way I take. And the same applied to something like online coaching or being a coach in general. At some point, there was just something missing in my life. And working for an agency was kind of sucking the soul out of me and taking the joy I had for that job away from me. This is always the risk when you are turning your hobby and your passion into your occupation. It can always then get to the point where you're simply not enjoying that anymore, because it's not about you just doing it whenever you want to, but it's now your full-time occupation. And thus the line between enjoying it and just having it as an occupation melts together, right? Or merges together. And for me, after a while, it just like, I don't know, I was so drained. I was so sick and tired, sitting in front of a computer like 16 hours sometimes per day. It was just, I don't know, you were always the idiot who had all the responsibility for the campaign, right? You had a certain deadline, you needed to be finished then. And you were kind of the lowest person in the hierarchy of that pyramid hierarchy. And at some point, I was just sick and tired of that. And I got more and more interested in my own progress when it comes to lifting. So back then, I was still a powerlifting or more into powerlifting. And I was, of course, trying to optimize my training, nutrition, was reading tons and lots of things. Just consumed so much content there. And after a while, friends of mine, they opened up a CrossFit gym. I think it was back in 2014 here in Berlin. And in 2015, they were looking for kind of a strength coach. So basically, we then agreed that I'd come on the team there and that I give strength classes. Did that for a year. And then it was 2016 already. And as I already said earlier, I just consumed and devoured so much information in my free time. And even sometimes when I was sitting in the office, whenever I found the time. So I had a couple of monitors in front of me, right? So I think in my office, I had 2 monitors in front of me. So certain times I always had one window open where I had an article, and on the other one, I was doing the work. Or when I was really doing the work and I needed to concentrate, I always had a podcast or some kind of educational content running in the background, so that I was killing 2 birds with 1 stone, that I'm doing the work, so I'm fulfilling my purpose at work, but at the same time, I'm still learning on the side and I'm not, quote unquote, wasting my time. So yeah, then I slowly, 2016, I then decided to go to different seminars, which were in UK. So the first one I attended was the 3D MJ seminar hosted by the Shredded by Science Academy in 2016. I think it was June 2016. This is also the first time where I met Steve. So we just had a quick chat. I've been following him already for a while. Back in the days, it was still Snapchat, where he did always each and every single day Steve on the comment. So he was walking around in his park or the area where he was living in, Clapham, London, back in the days, and it was always doing or recording Snapchat stories talking about a specific topic on that day. So we got to meet each other on the seminar day. Didn't really find the time to talk, though, just to say hi. And a short time after, I think it was end of September 2016, I participated the second seminar from Shredded by Science, and he was there again. And this time we had a little bit more time to catch up and talk a little bit, get to know each other. And in the end of 2016, then, it was that I was really seriously playing then with transitioning over to online coaching. I was already doing the Shredded by Science Academy as well during that time, which was good. Definitely, I learned something, but some things weren't really new to me anymore. But with Luke Johnson, who was the owner of Shredded by Science, and now transitioned over to call it the personal trainer collective. I had a chat with him about my self-employment, going fully online trainer, and I was kind of, I don't know, contemplating with everything is not really set up, nothing is perfect, and he was basically saying, okay, Pascal, I want you to take now 7 days, get everything together, and then just release your page, because no one knows about you, and if you don't put anything out there, no one will know anything about you the week after, right? But if you if you release something now, then you can start making people aware of you and what you're doing, all that kind of stuff. So I did that in December 2016, and then released or published my website in 2017 January. And funny enough, at this time, Steve was looking for a second coach, and so I applied. Basically, keep it really short, I applied. There was a procedure or an application process of, I think, 5 steps. Came to the 4th step, and then it was already like, okay, we know each other, we stand for the same thing, we believe in the same thing, the visions are as well the same, and we just got along well. So yeah, from there on, I became a coach for Revive Stronger, and the rest is kind of history already, right? Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, great story. By the way, it sounds like me as well. Like when I'm at work also, like I listen to stuff. It's just like, for me, wasting time is like, it hurts me.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I know that sometimes it's not really that beneficial, especially like when you have a partner at home and she would like to have you for herself on the weekends. And I'm working 7 days a week, and I know at some point I'll probably have to pull back, but I also at the same time enjoy that, and that's the problem with that. So it's like you. I mean, I have a problem not being productive or feel like I'm not productive.
Exactly. Yeah. I just want to come back really quick to the world-class coach thing I said before, because perhaps I guess also you took it a little bit the wrong way. How I mean that is, I also see just the huge potential you guys have. I mean, sure, there are probably perhaps coaches like Eric Helms that have like 10 or 15 years more experience. But what I see with you guys from Revive Stronger is just like the mindset you bring to the table. You have like so many experts on your YouTube channel. Like I can link it down below. The podcast are just like so insightful, and just the fact that you said that you're so humble and you have the willingness to learn is just a big factor in my statement from before, because I see so many coaches out there, not so many, but I just have the feeling a lot of coaches are in there for the wrong reasons. And I'm getting coached by Steve right now, and I just feel like, he really wants to give value. He wants to be the best coach that he can be. And I see this the same in yourself. And yeah, that's just like how I see it. Perhaps not the best coaches in terms of like experience in the game, but just like the mindset, the willingness, and the value you provide. Like you guys always go the extra mile, and that's also the reason why I can really like
Yeah, and
relate to that.
I really appreciate that, mate. And yeah, I mean, eventually, of course, our ultimate goal is to be one of the leading coaching services in the world. And I don't make a secret about that, and I don't think that we need to. That is just the overall goal, and we are working for that. And whether we get to that point, we don't know, right? But the good thing about something like that is you have kind of the future in your own hands, and you can try. And if you don't get there, fair enough. Then you can actually lean back and say, okay, at least I tried. But if you are complaining about not getting to your goals without having tried to get there, right? I mean, this is something then that's your own fault, so to
Yes.
speak.
Yes.
So yeah, this is definitely our goal, and hopefully we will get there at some point. I don't know.
Yeah, but I just leave it there. That's my opinion. Like the world class coach, I leave it there. And also for my subscribers, like check out the YouTube channel. Like I
Yes.
can really recommend the. I force my friends always to listen to like Revive Stronger. And
Yeah, it should be. So I'm not saying that I'm a little bit biased. So of course I can't say that without sounding biased or without sounding like I'm doing a sales pitch. But I think that our podcast is a really great resource for learning, and I think that everyone should check out it. And I think that we have probably deserved a little bit more subscribers there. So.
Yes.
For all the people listening to your channel now or to this episode, subscribe.
Yes, and let him know in the comments below. Exactly. I guess Pascal, you are like reading the comments, right? You always like
yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a pain, but I mean, it has to be done. No, I always enjoy every single minute of that.
Like Steve, you look so huge. Like thank you, Pascal.
yeah. Like these are the best comments. Like Steve, thank you very much for that information. Yeah, you're welcome, Pascal.
Yeah.
So, but I also enjoy those moments where it's just like, oh, thank you so much, Steve. Yeah, sure thing. Happy that we could do something for you. Greetings, Pascal.
I don't know if you realize it, but like lately, I just did it on purpose. Like, Steve, you look so big, and I knew you will read the comments.
Yeah, I think many people do that by now, because I was just joking on the side, like, man, I have to answer all of the comments that are just flattering you all the time. And now so many people who are regular listeners do just put that in the comment section, even if you don't see Steve's arms. But he got big, so I'll have to give it to him.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, talking about fitness, finally, the gym and everything. I want to talk about fat loss because we have like 3 to 4 months to go till like summer. And I get a lot of questions about how to lose fat, and stuff like that. And I know that you have a lot of knowledge in this area, and you have perhaps also a blueprint for my subscribers. So what I would like to ask is, how would you set up like a successful fat loss phase? What goes through your head before you start, and what would you do then?
Of course, this is pretty broad, right? Because a successful fat loss journey starts already before the diet. And this is something many people don't take into consideration or realize, that if you've been eating like shit before that, and I'm not just specifically talking about like unhealthy quote unquote things, but more so, and this is unfortunately often the case for female individuals, under eating chronically since years on end, then the success of your upcoming diet will probably be impacted by that as well. So of course, when you want to be successful, you need to put yourself in a proper position first. And by that, probably something at maintenance for a longer time, so that the negative adaptations are dissipated or not even present at the time when you're starting a fat loss journey. And then planning that properly out, and being aware that it may impact your life as well. And this is the second point before the diet starts. Are you even ready to diet? And we've already touched on that with the have you been dieting before? Have you been under eating for a longer period of time, etc., etc. If that's off the table already and you answered that question, now you can get to the next step, and it's like, okay, is my life and my environment, does that allow me to be successful in my diet? Because I see so many diets fail because of the support or non-support people get from their loved ones or environment. Unfortunately, and this is something that has to be said, some people don't like when you succeed. It's just the way some humans are, right? And they will talk down on you, and they will try to talk something into your, or put something into your head, like an idea that you don't want to actually lose that weight, right? Or that when you do, you are less superior or so, right? Something like, "Ah, before you lost all the weight, you look better," stuff like that, right? They start to judge you for your goals and for your desires. And if that's something that gets to you, of course this has an impact as well. And if you also know that you're graduating at the moment, you're, I don't know, writing your thesis or so, probably also not the best time to dive through that, because you need the full attention and energy for the thesis, and not let the diet impact with, I don't know, something like sleep deprivation, or not as qualitative amounts of sleep, brain fog, all that kind of stuff. Let that impact the thesis. So if you got those things off the table, now you can start to plan the actual diet. And then it's quite straightforward, right? As we know, a caloric deficit is the most important thing to lose some body fat. How aggressive you want to go about it, that's always individual dependent. When you are an experienced dieter, I always say, like, okay, you can start a little bit more aggressive because you know what's about to come and what's about to happen. Because I think that diet, or dieting in it for itself, or cutting, gaining, all these kind of methodologies are also skills at the same time. And everyone who has been dieting for a couple of times by now knows it, that every single cut is easier and easier to endure, and most often also so much more successful in how far you can push it, how hard you can push it. Because once you've been through a fat loss journey and you come out alive, which is the case, I would say 99.9% of the time,
Yeah.
then you realize, okay, yeah, there was a little bit of suffering there, but I didn't die. And actually, it wasn't really that bad. And when you really think about it, that's how life in general works. If you are committed to something and you are getting to your overall goal, it just feels good at the end. And you realize that maybe you came into a new territory which you have never been to before, and you realize what you are capable of, right? And thus, yes, once again, to come back to that, if you're more an experienced dieter, you can even push it a little bit harder. I wouldn't advise it for people who have only been dieting like one time, two times, or maybe never at all. In that case, I would say, okay, start with something less assertive, depending on where you've started, right? When you're starting really heavily obese, of course, you can push it a little bit harder as well. But somewhere in the range of 0.5 up to 1.5% of body weight loss per week is always a good thing to aim for. At the first initial weeks, aim for the higher end of the spectrum, and then over the next couple of weeks, then once you get leaner and leaner, once you feel the diet, taper it down a little bit. And most of the time this happens automatically, though, due to the drop of non-exercise activity thermogenesis, so the activity outside of the gym. These are just normal negative adaptations that occur with us, and if you're not aware of them, they will have an impact and they will take place. But also such as other metabolic adaptations, right? I mean, the basal metabolic rate, so the resting metabolic rate, which is when you're not doing anything at all, the metabolic rate, which just is there to keep you alive, the function of the organs and stuff, in the scientific literature has been shown to drop by 10 to 15% max. And there we are talking about people who have been super obese, who've lost like an insane amount of weight, who've nearly not eaten at all, and that drop in basal metabolic rate always came back to baseline levels again afterwards. So don't really put it on your metabolism, that your metabolism just slows down that much, because most of the time that's not true. It is just that you're getting less active and some other adaptations occur and are more likely to cause a reduction in overall of your overall deficit. And also, by the way, you're getting just lighter, and that expends less energy as well. So when it then comes to the how many calories you want to cut, this is always where you then hear specific targets being thrown around, such as 500 calories of your maintenance calories, which is, I think, not the best thing to do. I always like to do a percentage-based thing as well, because here as well, 500 calories for a 130-pound female who's sedentary is quite different to someone who's weighing 250, is, I don't know, a NFL linebacker or so quite active still at the same time, right? For him, 500 calories is just like, I don't know, that is a snack. And for her, it's nearly half of her daily income, right? And thus, I always take like percentages as well, like to do that. You can start with something in the range of 30%. Most of the time, that will lead a good amount of weight loss initially. You can also then go by calories per pound of body weight. So drop it to something like 10 to 12 calories per gram of per pound of body weight. It's always a good thing to do as well. I hardly ever have seen people needing to go below 10 kcals per pound of body weight to go further, except for a few female individuals in a prep situation. But this is not the typical diet for the summertime. So either go with percentages of your caloric deficit, or do something like 10 up to 12 kcals per pound of body weight, and you should be good.
Yeah. Talking about the negative adaptations, also something funny that happened to me is I did like my 5th or 6th fat loss phase last year, and back then I had a mastermind group of like 2 friends. We were like 3 friends. We've met always once a week, and we talked about our struggles, our challenges. And then I was always like, guys, I feel stressed because of my calorie deficit. I cannot really be productive and everything. And they were like, they had empathy for me, but they were never really cutting down. So they were like, what is he talking about every week? What's up with him? He seems so stressed, And then one of these friends also started to cut down. And then after 1 month, he came to me, was like, dude, I know what you've meant, dude. I'm like, I'm getting crazy slowly. Like,
I mean, it's one of those situations. If you haven't gone through something like that, probably you can't relate to it, especially when you're trying to cut down to more extreme levels. I've never done a bodybuilding show yet, and that's one of the things that I just want to do for myself, but also to just be more able to relate to my clients who are stepping on stage. I don't think that it's a requirement. However, I think it may be just positive to just relate to them somewhat. If I could go through a menstrual cycle, I would do that as well, just to be able to relate a little bit more to females, right? But obviously, I can't. Not yet.
Yeah. That's a good point also regarding the negative adaptations and becoming a better coach. Like also, when I was cutting down, when it got hard, I was telling myself, I will become a better coach if you just push through it. And I had this situation where, during my first fat loss phase, I was a little bit younger. I had no idea how to like set up a successful environment for my fat loss phase. And last time I was super crazy about it. So what I did is I never had my first meal at home. So basically what I had to do is before work, I had to walk to the supermarket, which was 5,000 steps away, buy the food, and then basically either walk back or take the tram back. So before my first meal, I had to do like 5,000 or 6,000 steps before I ate my first meal. My environment.
Well, that's a pretty cool strategy, mate.
Yeah.
I mean, really, you sometimes you just have to be or get creative about that. And if that allows you to even get more energy expenditure up, and at the same time, I don't know, make your dieting a little bit easier because you're busy. Because the thing that breaks most people is if they are just not occupied or busy with something. Or, of course, when they are in a social situation where everyone else is having a good time and they associate having a good time with then eating and drinking as well. But most often it's just like sitting at home in front of your television, and your girlfriend or boyfriend is, I don't know, snacking on something, and you're just bored. That is the time when most people fail their diet. And thus, when you're then having like a routine and a schedule, such as you, at the same time, and then getting some steps up, it just kills one, two, three, four birds with one stone, right?
Mm,
So that's
yeah.
actually really good and a creative thing to do.
Thanks. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was also listening to a lot of podcasts during that time, so that's
Yeah,
pretty good.
just stay active, just stay busy. And I mean, it's the perfect opportunity to actually then go out, listen to audiobooks, listen to podcasts. And that's what I'm always doing as well. When I'm doing my walks, which is when I'm cutting always around 10 to 12,000 steps right now. Um, I make the time for that, and that is just an important piece of my day where it's just like, okay, at 8 in the morning, I'm going out to have my first walk and I'm listening to a podcast or an audiobook. Um, you have to get into a routine there as well to make it a habit so that you're not questioning it. And this is a strategy that many people need to implement as well, building habits so that when the willpower isn't there and the motivation isn't there, because these will be gone at some point. You will not be motivated at some point. You will not have the willpower at some point. And
Yeah.
if you rely on them too much, you will fail. And that's why you need to start identifying yourself with your routine, with the things you're doing, and you start to need to make it a habit so that it's just an automated process. That you start that when you to feel discomfort when you're not doing those type of things, where it's just like, I'm not going to the gym anymore because I have to or so, but when I'm not going, I just don't feel the same. This is where you want to get towards to, with habits, that you feel like, okay, it's just part of me. It's just what I'm doing. No one is forcing me. It's not about just fat loss. It's just who I am at that
Hmm.
point in time.
Hmm. Yeah, beautiful point. Also, talking about habits and willpower, some interesting stuff I started to do after reading a lot of books about it is I was just decreasing the activation energy I needed to start the habit or start the action. So,
Mm.
what I do right now, as a quick example, is I need to learn like some anatomy and physiology because I will have an exam soon. And I realized if I just put the stuff on my table during the evening and I just need to grab it with my left hand, the probability that I just look at it for 5 minutes is so high. But if it's in my bag or something, if I need to take one step more to activate the action, I don't do it. Like
Yeah.
it's crazy how we work. It's crazy.
No, absolutely. And on that note, shout out to James Clear on Atomic Habits, the book.
Mm,
It's really easily digestible, easy to read, easy to understand. It's a great book about building habits and also getting rid of quote unquote bad habits. And I would just highly recommend everyone to listen to that one or to read that one, because it can be so eye-opening when you are struggling with like bad things and you want to get rid of them, but you can't. Such as smoke. I mean, we are not living in a generation anymore, at least not in my environment, where I have the feeling that many of our people are smoking anymore. But when I was going to school, you were an outsider when you weren't smoking. I was never a smoker, never. But I do know that many people were then like, oh, I want to stop smoking, but I can't. Okay, because you're always putting yourself in a situation where the anticipation is there to smoke, right? And if you're having habits like these, if you know that these are there, okay, this book can help you with that one. And
yeah.
I'm not the biggest fan of like these life lesson books, and that's not what this book is all about. It doesn't tell you what you need to do. It just gives you kind of strategies and things to think about. And these are the books that I, for myself, enjoy the most.
Yeah, totally true. James Clear's book is amazing, because I've also read other books like The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg,
Yeah.
and Willpower by Roy Baumeister. And these books are good, but they focus too much on the scientific part, like which part of the brain is active.
Yeah.
And to be honest, it's interesting, but it doesn't help me really to take action then. And James Clear really focuses on the application of this knowledge.
And Charles, that's exactly what we've been talking about earlier. Some people try to sound scientific or intellectual, and yes, their writing style is definitely a different one than James Clear's, and probably also their background and stuff like that. But at the same time, does it really help the majority of the people? Is it really important in that context? And sometimes it's not. I mean, some people enjoy listening to something like that. I myself do. So a good book like that is Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers from Robert Sapolsky, all about stress, for example. And he really goes into depth about how it developed, what parts of the brains are responsible for that. I do enjoy that. But in the end, if you just want kind of a quick, easy, and understandable explanation about how things may be working and stuff, and a straightforward thing for you to apply for yourself, a book like James Clear is probably more helpful than getting into the gist of scientific literature and stuff.
Yes, totally. For everyone listening, like, check out that book. Get it on Audible, then you can just listen to it and get your steps in.
Yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, we talked about calories, and I just want to mention really quick, like when people hear these numbers, they try to do it perfect. But just to start off with, I would just take a number that sounds like you are in a deficit. Like if you're a guy and you never cut it down, just pick a number that kind of works for you with your lifestyle, then see how much weight you lose in the first weeks and go from there. Because I realize a lot of guys, especially that are like nerdy and stuff, they want to find the perfect approach, and then they focus on the little things. I have that with Steve a lot. Like every week I ask Steve like a question, and after I ask the question, I tell Steve like, yeah, I know it probably doesn't matter, but I would like to know your answer. But most of the time it doesn't matter at all,
No,
So,
absolutely. Especially like when you have no idea where your deficit or what's a big deficit for you, what isn't. I'm always err on the side of more aggressive. That's my take on it, because you are most hopefully coming from a situation where you're not diet fatigued, the things we've talked about, right? Your body fat levels are higher. You're just feeling energetic because your glycogen stores are higher still. So you are in a much better position to even go a little bit more aggressive because your body can endure that. And at the same time, if you have never dieted before, you don't really want to waste that much time. You want to actually see initial results and initial success, just to get some kind of a reaffirmation and to keep you on track. And if you see in the first couple of days that the scale weight is just coming down, that is kind of motivating at the same time. So always err on the side of going a little bit more aggressive, I think, in my opinion. And I'm not saying like fast the 24 hours or so for the next 7 days, but more so, yeah, instead of going like 500 calories deficit, go to something like 700 or so, right? If you have your calculated maintenance, but you're not really certain whether it is your true maintenance, cut away a good chunk of calories from that one.
And what would you say, like macronutrient wise? What would you track? Would you track everything or just the protein? And if just the protein, how much protein?
I'm always a big fan of tracking everything, because if you're not tracking, how would you know that you are on track? All right, because even, and this is something that scientific literature has shown as well, even skilled and educated people such as nutritionists are off in their calorie estimation by a huge amount of calories. And there have been, especially like obese individuals have shown like to underestimate their calories by up to 50 to 60% of their daily intake. And we all know that person who says like, I'm not eating that much. I don't know how I'm actually gaining that amount of weight. All right. I'm only eating like 1,500 calories. But you're forgetting the other 1,500 calories that are like the full fat milk in your coffee, and you are having the, I don't know, latte mochaccino from Starbucks or so, right? All those kind of things add up. And if you're not tracking, how do you actually know? Right. And also, that's future data that may be beneficial for you. If you now are tracking all the things, probably in the future, you have a better understanding where to go to initially, but also in the future. So I would always recommend tracking. I'm not the biggest fan of just like, I don't know, intuitive eating and stuff. I think it's a great idea. I'm also a fan of mindful eating when we are speaking about those terms. I know that the two authors of the intuitive eating book, I always forgot their names, Evelyn, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. You can look it up. They were referring to mindful eating, but they actually said intuitive eating. And when we take it by the word intuitive, you can look it up as well. I don't know, Google it or so. What intuitive means is free from rationality, just based on emotions. And when we are talking about intuitive eating, right, and you just put a different, or switch the terminology around, it is emotional eating, which is of course idiotic in my opinion, because when I would listen to my emotions would tell me to eat Ben and Jerry's the entire day. But yeah, my emotions are plain stupid if their counterpart isn't holding their hand, and that's my rationality. But rationality is useless without emotions as well, in my opinion, to be a good human being. Anyway, what I want to say though is, when it then comes to the tracking of things, I think when it comes to protein, of course, always I'm a bigger fan of always going with a slightly higher intake, because nothing in the scientific literature has shown a negative thing of having a slightly higher intake. However, when we go the other way around, having too lower of an intake of protein is detrimental, because of you're not ingesting a sufficient amount of amino acids, and thus, where does the synthesis of protein come from? From your muscle mass, right? Thus, have a higher protein intake. Also, most of the time, I know there was a scientific literature out there with a satiety of protein that it has shown that it's not more satiating, but I'm not fully convinced of that. More so from anecdotal observations, but also just from thinking about it. To me, it doesn't really make sense now. I could be fully wrong in the future though. But yeah, I think that protein, as it stands for me right now, is also a little bit more satiating. Thus, the fat loss journey makes it probably a little bit easier for you to adhere to that than fats. It always depends, of course, what you can get away with. I would keep it kind of to a minimum. What that looks like for you is always individual dependent. I like to go by percentages more so from your overall calorie intake, like 15 to 25% when you are dieting. I know other people are going by grams per kilogram of body weight. I think that the lowest recommended is 0.4 grams per kilogram, I think, of body weight, if I'm not mistaken. That is low, but easily you can get away with that as long as your essential fatty acids are in check, and the rest is then coming from carbohydrates.
Good point, because also one of my friends, he was here in the live chat recently. Shout out to Ricardo, and he trains in the same gym that I train. And he made me a little bit angry, because he always, I mean, he cuts down body fat, but he always does it like low carb, like super low carb. And I always tell him, dude, why are you doing that? Like, just as you said, decrease your fats to a minimum to keep you healthy. Take your omega-3s, perhaps supplement or eat fish, and then hit your protein and the rest carb. to maintain your performance, basically?
I mean, there is definitely something in the literature in the satiety, and some people are pretty much satiated when they are eating something like a lower carbish approach, which makes sense because fats have an impact on the digestive rate, and they are releasing some enzymes which slow down the digestion even more. So it kind of makes sense, but at the same time, it comes at the cost of a lower volume of food most of the time, because fats are just higher in their caloric density. It's 9 kcals per gram in comparison to something like 4 kcals per gram. Most likely you will eat and consume less volume of food. Play around a little bit. I know for a fact that when I'm in a gaining phase and my fats are pretty low, I can eat more than if I increase my fats a little bit higher. Which is counterproductive because the volume or the size of my meals aren't really as big when my fats are increased, but it is just due to the impact of the digestion rate and my small intestine and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, play around a little bit, but don't really sacrifice too many carbohydrates, because especially when you are in a cutting phase, your central nervous system is primarily fueled by carbohydrates, and when you slash those and you are always on the edge of depletion, it's probably not beneficial for your overall training. And when your training is going to shit, the likelihood of you losing muscle mass along the way is increased, and that is more counterproductive than, I don't know, the effects of that ketogenic diets may give you on satiety.
Yeah, good points. Yeah, you said play around, so I always urge people to experiment a little bit with these numbers. I guess you forgot to mention the protein number.
Protein is so do you want kilograms or per pound of body weight?
Yeah, we can do both.
So when it comes to kilograms, so when it comes to cutting, I always like to aim for something like 2.3 grams per kilogram of body weight, up to something like 2.8, sometimes even beyond that, for individuals who just enjoy eating more protein, because there's nothing wrong with that. I'm someone myself, I just enjoy eating more protein, and it's not like the bro talking inside of me, but it's just like the foods I do enjoy are high in protein, such as quark, such as steak, such as chicken breast. Yeah, I know it sounds weird, but these are the things I do enjoy.
Yeah,
and thus my protein intake is just automatically high, and I don't need to think about it too much, and it exceeds those recommendations quite easily. But it's absolutely right. And other people always then bring up the argumentation about, yeah, but protein is such an expensive carbohydrate source then, right? Because you're exchanging that, and via gluconeogenesis, it's being turned into glucose, so being used for for energy then. But I don't think that this is truly the case. And if you were to do the math, it would be marginal by, I don't know, even a couple of cents, if at all. I mean, I'm living in Germany, and quark is just, people throw or give you quark basically for free. That's how cheap it is here, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't think that this argumentation stands. So other than that, 1 grams of a pound of body weight is the typical recommendation, just to give also the pound recommendation, which I think is a good starting point. But if you are a resistance trainee, as I already said earlier, the scientific literature has not yet shown that there's any kind of detrimental or adverse health effects of a higher protein intake. However, the other way around, it has some detrimental effects. Thus, 1 gram of pound of body weight is right on the edge of the recommendations. So I would always err on the side of safety and have a little bit of a higher intake, especially in a cutting scenario where the muscle protein breakdown is higher and more often in the case of catabolism. I would just err on the side of safety and have a little bit of a higher intake there.
Yeah, good point. So as the last question, I'm curious, and I guess the viewers as well, how does like a typical cutting day for you look like, approximately, like regarding food and times and everything?
Not that different to any other day of my like gaining or maintenance cycle. And I think that this is probably a typical and a fallacy most people fall into, that they are changing things up too drastically when they are going from a maintenance phase into a cutting phase, or the other way around, from a cutting phase into a gaining phase or so. They are changing things up too drastically. And of course, this increases your likelihood of failure when you think about your physiology and all that kind of stuff. And does it make things easier? Probably not. And what I see with most people as well is that they do make better choices while they are in a cutting phase, which is quite crazy, right? And then they are coming out of it, and they fall back into old habits, or start to eat more palatable foods that don't really satisfy their mineral and vitamin needs. And basically, they are worse off when they are in a maintenance or gaining phase, and they are not as structured and have a harder time actually sticking then to the diet than when they are cutting. So I would just say, do what you have done in the past. Don't change things up too drastically. Don't change much about your meal frequency or so, because there's also something like ghrelin, for example, the hunger hormone, that is based on our typical meal frequency, and we can control ghrelin. So it always spikes at times when we are used to eat. We all know that, right? We approach, I don't know, 10 a.m. in the morning. All of a sudden, we get hungry without any kind of particular reason, but it's maybe because all of the weeks prior to that, you have eaten around 10 a.m. And you can get you can endure that. Give it like half an hour to an hour, and sometimes you will be surprised that all of a sudden you're not hungry anymore afterwards. So yeah, think about that. And if you're then just keeping that in mind, if you were to transition from something like a maintenance phase, and let's say you had like 5 meals per day, to something like only 3 meals per day, or something like intermittent fasting or so, into a cutting phase, you make things probably much, much harder for yourself. So I would just play with the quantity of your macros, the volume, exchange carbohydrates with less dense carbohydrate food sources, such as, let's say you have always had potatoes before that for lunch. Now you can still have potatoes, but reduce them maybe by half and fill up the rest of your carbohydrates with the vegetables. And voila, you already saved, I don't know, 200, 300 calories there or so, right? And still you have your typical meal. You're not changing things up too drastically, all those kind of things. And the same way around, if you are transitioning out of a cutting phase, don't just change up everything at once. Don't just be like, okay, cut is over, Ben and Jerry's, let's go. Don't do that, because it just sets you up for failure, and it sets you up for a pretty hefty rebound, which is leaving you in a worse position than you started.
Yeah, I guess the rebound always happens if you change up your habits too much during the fat loss phase, and then you go back and and then you're basically like, sorry for the word, but then you're fucked. Like you gain the 5 kilograms, 10 kilograms back, and
totally. And you didn't regain the muscle mass that you've lost over the entirety of the cut. Yes. Thus, you are in a worse position, and that is not beneficial. That is not the aim of a cutting phase. Totally. Shouldn't be the aim to actually make you stand there with a worse body composition actually after a couple of months.
Yeah, I mean, if you get coached by Pascal or Steve, you will look better at the end of the fat loss phase. But
hopefully, when you're listening to us, I mean,
I mean, I documented on my YouTube channel, so people will see it. Awesome. So yeah, thanks, Pascal, for your time. I really appreciate it. And I want to ask you also, when people would like to contact you, what would be the best way?
Via mail, so they can send me a postcard to my home address. I'm old school. No, of course not. So, of course, you can visit revivestronger.com. You can also find me over on Facebook, Pascal Flor, or you can head over to Instagram, check out Revive Stronger there, or head directly over to my personal Instagram account. I'm not as active there, but you can always reach out to me. I have my phone in my hands quite often. So Pascal_Flor, if I'm not mistaken, over there. And of course, check out our podcast and YouTube channel, Revive Stronger, there as well. So yeah, these are kind of the platforms where you can find me. And if you want to get in touch with me probably you can actually get in touch with me all there.
Or come to London in May.
Or come to London in May. Yes, of course. The London seminar, 11th and 12th of May. We bring over the RP guys, so Mike Sertel, James Hoffman, and Gabriel Fondero this time. Steve and I will be there this time. We will not be presenting because we leave the stage for the 3 presenters. And it's a 2-day seminar. Kind of. So you can get normal tickets, which are only including the first day, which is just the seminar, the presentations. The second day, we still have 3 tickets left, VIP tickets, which is the first day and the second day. The second day is all about training. So we get into the gym. It's quite an exclusive setting. Not many people are included there. And then we are training and destroying ourselves together.
Nice. Looking forward. We look
Yeah,
forward.
Absolutely.
So is there an end message you want to give to my viewers or to the viewers before we end that live stream?
Oh, I'm always so bad with that one. Sometimes I'm throwing around with a life or kind of deep life knowledge. But right now, I don't know, get out and don't waste time. Maybe it's just because I'm right now listening to David Goggins' Can't Hurt Me. And he's just like, roger that, go get out and just do it, because you are always surprised what you're capable of.
Yes, that's a good one. That's a good one. Thank you so much, Pascal. Thank you so much for everybody listening. And yeah, I will see you in the next one.
Cheers.
Cheers.